What exactly does a housing ambassador do?
Housing ambassador, I've got to say two parts of my roles. One is to help with our social media and website stuff, getting resources out there for people to get informed about affordable housing, supportive housing. Our group is starting to work with the end poverty stuff as well, because that's also very deeply connected and very important. But as housing ambassador, my job is to help communities have a good conversation about affordable and supportive housing.
One of the big things that comes up when talking about housing in other neighborhoods and such are some of the fears that people might have if they hear that a social housing project might spring up in their neighborhood. How do you address those fears?
Well, sometimes you bring good information to the table. One of the main fears is that it impacts housing costs in the area, that it can be depressing on what homes are valued as. And actually the research shows that that's not the case. It's not the case here in Canada or the US or Britain. And so, when the research says that, it's like, okay, well, that helps dispel some fears. And sometimes it can even add value, right? So it's just sometimes bringing good information to the table helps dispel a lot of those fears. But then part of the goal of having a good conversation as well also helps dispel fears. Because we are all nervous about things at one level or another, and when we can come and sit down and talk to people who may agree or disagree with us, but we're able to express ourselves in a safe way, in a respectful way to each other, to listen, to understand. A lot of the time that our fears start to dissipate as well. And
what are some of the positive aspects of having social housing in a neighborhood?
When you think about how you as a community function, having a diversity in any sort of neighborhood generally makes things warmer. It changes how people think about each other, how they interact with each other. In this day and age, we see ourselves being very independent-minded, and we don't think that we rely on our neighbor for anything. And if you're part of a poorer community or a community with a lot of diversity, there's less of that people believe, and we tend to know our neighbors more. We tend to rely on each other. We call each other. Our kids play together more. Some of the research too shows that in mixed communities where there is some diversity in as far as rich and poor, and with more affordable housing, but especially mixed communities, that kids' grades also increase. That kids are smarter. They're more inclusive. They're less judgmental of others. They can get along better.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, here in McCauley, as president of the Community League, what are some of the concerns that residents bring to you, or maybe that you have yourself perhaps experienced firsthand as a result of there being such a high concentration of social housing in one neighborhood the way that it is here?
Yeah. Well, we have a very, very high percentage of social housing in our neighborhood, so that 64% is considered affordable or supportive housing.
Does that include shelter mats?
That does include shelter mats. Now the math changes a little bit when we count in the shelter mats. So then we have 38%, which is still very, very high. And the research shows us that there are lots of benefits that come actually with new affordable housing units into a neighborhood. That if you get up to 20%, it's all good. It's all there's measurable benefits. But once you get to 20%, past 20%, it starts to drop off. You start to see more negative things. And once you get to 40% in the United States, then it gets really, really bad. In Canada, our number is actually at 50%, because we have a much stronger social network better healthcare, all of those things make a huge difference. So, but it's still, we have a very, very high level of it, and so we do see a lot of the negatives that come with it too. We have a great deal of experience with affordable and supportive housing, so we see the good stuff and the bad stuff as well.
How do you deal with some of the bad stuff?
Well, there are some of the bad things that are difficult to deal with. So just we have the way that the shelter is set up is we have one very, very large shelter, and when you have a large shelter, it's hard. It's not great for anybody. It's hard for the people that are there. It's not a safe, quiet place to sleep for people who really need that. And there's we have experiences of violence outside shelters as well. So there's a lot of negatives that come with having a large shelter, and so that's hard because we know that this is necessary, but we also know it has a fairly significant negative impact on the surrounding businesses and the area, and it's not. There's better ways of doing it is what it comes to, and how do we get those better ways of doing it to happen? And it's a pretty major change of direction. There's lots of resistance to that idea. So, and we appreciate Hope Mission as a neighbor in many ways, and we see the work that they're trying to do. And hey, the work. We appreciate that they will send people to help volunteer at our events and do cleanups and things like that too. So certainly Hope Mission is trying to be a good neighbor in many ways. But there's fundamental flaws in how we're doing things that we just need to fix. So as far as other negative stories, most of it has to do with when we talk about problem properties in our neighborhood, we're not talking about affordable or supportive housing. We're
talking more about absentee landlords, slum landlords kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. The very low end of market housing, and again, it highlights a major hole that we have in our system. That we've had people from living in these kinds of settings come to us as the league and say, you know what? We're appreciative of slum landlord situations, of the slum landlords. They're the only ones who will take us in. We can't if we have criminal records, we have poor credit ratings, we have mental illnesses, we have addictions. No one wants to rent to us. We're untouchable, right? Or we're the untouchables, I guess. Nobody wants to help us. But these landlords take us in. They give us a home. And this is an unhealthy thing for, it serves a purpose of putting a roof over somebody's head, but other than that, it's absolutely horrific, because the people who are living in that situation, well, now if you've ever had a roommate situation, and you've had to try to figure out how you're going to negotiate kitchen space and clean up and all of those things, and you're doing that with people that come from relatively healthy backgrounds and situations, and then you throw 8 to 10 people into a house together, and rooms get broken into. It's full of all kinds of negative things that can happen as a result, and that impact is felt along the block as well. It's hit by the neighbors. So we hear some of those stories, and those are hard.
So a better solution for these people would be well-run, well-managed social housing.
Absolutely, and that's those are our good neighbors. We have so much supportive and affordable housing here. We never get complaints about those places, right? They tend to be well-run. They have good management, good ways of controlling, good controls and supports in place for people. And that makes a big difference. So, not everybody will do it equally well, but certainly we have far less issues with well-run facilities than with the slum landlords, where it's or there's very few controls, and even the only thing that a landlord can do is just, well, if there's a problem, you just evict the tenant. It doesn't solve any problems, any of the underlying issues.
So why does housing need to be a citywide responsibility?
Well, because it is there's a bunch of different reasons. It's the cheapest way forward, right? That's what the data says too, is that you've got someone living on the street. They're in a constant state of crisis. They don't know, and they are unable to pull themselves out of the gutter. And but we pay for the maintenance on that. So we pay for it in emergency visits, emergency room visits, in policing, in social work, response teams. We pay for it through the nose. And so it can cost $100,000 a year for a person on the street.
For one person.
For one person. And so that's part of the reason that the city's moved in the direction of housing first, which says we're trying to find a good way to a constructive way to address this. Affordable, supportable housing gives somebody a place where they are safe, where they have home, and give them supports there. And then the cost is only $35,000 a year. So financially, it's the way that makes the most sense. From a human dignity perspective, it is also what makes the most sense. And when we look at the data, the research, and it tells us that if a neighborhood that there are benefits to a community for up to 20%, then it's to say, it's something we've always known. Ghettos are bad, right? Don't make ghettos. But having mixed communities is good, and that's what the data says. And so it makes sense then to say, let's try and get mixed communities to happen all over the city. If we force vulnerable people into a few select neighborhoods, it's no good for them. It's no good for that neighborhood. We will face the cost of that on a whole number of different levels.
What does a caring community mean to you?
A caring community is when we start to actually know each other as neighbors and care for each other again. So what we used to do, before we had professional social workers, before we had affordable supportive housing units, right? We had people that opened their homes to each other, that prayed with each other, that cared for each other, that provided meals, that took people in. A strong culture of hospitality was part of it. Growing up in Canada, I don't know that I've ever experienced that. Part of me wants to go visit another part of the world where the village is still alive and where neighbors do know each other in that way. It's like we have so many resources and so much strength and wealth that we all try and do our own thing in our own way, and we no longer connect with those around us. And we're sort of believing a lie too, that we are able to do all this on our own and we don't need each other. The community of care is when neighbors start to notice when a friend across the way is struggling, when they're not doing well, when a family gets hit by cancer, that we as neighbors can come around that family and help them financially, help them with food, with childcare, with friendship, companionship. That kind of thing, I think, is just a missing piece to the puzzle. We expect the professionals to do all of that, and professionals can't. They can't fill some of those holes.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add that I haven't already asked about?
I don't know that I've said everything terribly well, but
how long have you lived in McCauley for at this point?
Lived in McCauley for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So, and we would instantly do it again. Mm-hmm. We love this neighborhood. We love the warm character of it, the fact that neighbors are not so self-sufficient, that they do know each other more. They're more willing to share life together and to help each other out when things go wrong. We love that, and that's something that we are just investing more and more in because it's the deepest way to experience community. So we, hands down, we would be back here in an instant. We think it's the best community in the city to live in. Mm-hmm. Very walkable. Our kids, aren't afraid of diversity. They aren't afraid of people on the street or people that are struggling. They don't have that fear. They have respect for people, and they're learning to treat people with dignity no matter where they're at. And those are really, really important lessons.
Mm-hmm. Any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. I would just say that this work of hospitality and welcoming the stranger is very, very important. And it's important to me, something that I grew up with, that my home as I was growing up was, when I was a kid, that my parents would always, we always had people coming through the house. And they were sometimes there were boarders from our church community or from a larger area, but a lot of time they were people that had just fallen really, really hard and needed a safe place to pull things back together. And my mom and dad would take them in, and they'd become an older brother or sister to us, and we were raised with that. And for us, it's the richest way to live. It's something that we are passing on to our kids too, that we have a home where people are welcome, and that we've had all kinds of different people coming through our doors and sleeping in our basements or on our couch. Not too often on our couch. We usually try to keep it to a bedroom, but that it is just a rich way to live life, is to be generous with the little that you have, in creating safe and healthy places for people to heal, and being that safe relationship too that helps people take a step forward in that direction.
Great. Thank you very much.